This is undoubtedly the most thrilling horror film in years, inspired by the Slavic horror legend The Ghost Fish, which has haunted the midnight dreams of millions since its release. When night fell, she would appear at the lake as a beautiful young woman, combing her hair while hunting, and all the men she encountered would perish. Yet, the man at the lake seemed to witness something horrifying, standing there frozen. His wife, sensing something amiss with him, cautiously approached to understand what was wrong. As she neared him from behind, he slowly turned back, and upon seeing this, she hurried to the lake's edge to investigate further. However, the lake suddenly returned to its normal state, and in her confusion, her husband emerged from it, only for her to realize that he had been killed. Upon seeing the girl, Handsome jumped out and swam desperately to the shore, breathing a sigh of relief only after climbing up. Suddenly, his wife was pulled into the lake by an unseen force. He swam to the shore immediately, and his husband reached out to help. But then, a ghostly hand emerged from the lake, pulling his wife and son down. As a wedding gift for young Handsome, I must say he's a good father, but this action will make him face the same horror scene as before. It's a wonderful plot to share with my girlfriend. Are you still watching movies alone? Why not explore online to find singles in your city and meet new friends nearby? I'm not saying you have to explore online to find a cute girl, but it's fun to spend time with new people. On the night after the singles night, Handsome took 3 or 5 of his friends and drove to the house by the lake, where they had a wild time, enjoying beer and girls. But after a few drinks, Handsome became a little drunk, so he went to the lake alone to try to sober up. But the deeper he swam, the more piercing the lake water became, as if something was approaching him. Handsome looked back in horror, but he found nothing but a few bubbles floating up, and he was a little frightened. The only thing that remained was a few bubbles of water that floated up in the middle of the night after such a sudden experience. Handsome was inevitably a little frightened, so he immediately returned, but unexpectedly, just as he reached the shore, he saw a yellow-haired woman not far from him who stood there wetly wearing Handsome's clothes and holding a comb in her hand, and in her eyes, she seemed to be hiding a little bit of love. And finally, she combed up her hair for a purpose, and when he saw the woman's appearance as a dancer, Handsome was immediately struck by the sight of a girl's dancing sister. She was so captivated by the moment that she approached her without even asking where she came from, simply to enjoy a fleeting pleasure in the rain. Handsome spent the entire night by the lake, lost in thought, and it wasn't until his friend came searching for him that he finally snapped back to reality. During this time, he had been calling out for the mysterious girl from the previous night. His friend questioned, how could there be any girl in the middle of the countryside, he asked, puzzled, and then he persuaded Handsome to return home. However, just as Handsome glanced down, he unexpectedly stumbled upon the comb, which prompted him to turn around and bring it back with him. He returned to his home with the comb in hand, unaware that the brief moment of tenderness from the night before would haunt him as a nightmare for the rest of his life. After the journey, Handsome wanted to unwind with a bath, but midway through, the water unexpectedly stopped running, and the shower in the adjacent room suddenly turned on for no apparent reason. But not long after he had washed himself, the same thing happened again, and it was at this time that the sound of a door slamming repeatedly came from behind him. Handsome went to check it out, but the scene in front of him was very strange. Looking at the door in front of him, which was often closed, Handsome thought to himself that when he first came to the encounter, there was no one there, so how could the door on his knees be closed all of a sudden? Therefore, he slowly walked over to see what was going on. But after a thorough inspection, he found nothing unusual. Now Handsome was completely baffled. While he was puzzled, a ghostly figure suddenly appeared behind him, followed by a familiar sound that reached Handsome. Handsome, with chicken feathers on his back, returned home and lay shivering under the blanket. It was only when May came to visit her that she felt better. But later, when May was washing her boyfriend's clothes, she found the comb, but she wasn't sure. What had Handsome done? So she contacted Handsome's sister and asked if she'd seen this comb before. When she looked at it, it looked familiar. So she searched the computer and found the same book in a photo. But then, right next to the cup, there was a large amount of water underneath it, as if it was a warning. But they didn't care. They just did what they were supposed to do. Handsome continued practicing at the pool, and Mai swam in the kitchen. Xiaomei went to the kitchen to wash the dishes, but then she heard something outside the door and thought it was her boyfriend, so she went to check, but the corridor was empty, except for the door of the bathroom, which had been opened. She thought it was his boyfriend bathing, so she went to the door to check, but she was shocked to find a horrible ghostly hand on his head, but it disappeared when she pushed the door open, and all that was left was the strange, ghostly hand, which had been opened by a ghost. The comb was lying motionless in the bathtub, but May didn't think twice about it, so she went up and took it out, but the next moment, she was gasping for breath from the nightmare. But when Handsome noticed something unusual, he gently caressed her. "Good girl, don't be afraid." Only then did she gradually relax and caress her girlfriend. Handsome went on to the swimming pool to practice, but as soon as she jumped into the pool, she seemed to notice that something was not right, and the pool, which had been so clear, turned muddy. The pool, which had been crystal clear, suddenly became muddy, and even the surrounding area was filled with weeds. When Shui saw this, he hastily dived out of the water, and was shocked to find that he had somehow seen the lake, and even the strange woman had suddenly come in front of him. Shui was so shocked by this that when they saw how he looked, they immediately sent him to the hospital, thinking of the strange things he had experienced over the past few days with the woman he had met by the river. Shui couldn't stand the pressure any longer, so she told her girlfriend the whole story. Xiaomei heard these words and didn't care whether the woman by the river was a human being or a ghost. She immediately thought that Xiao Shui had wronged her, so without saying a word, he left the hospital room seeing that his girlfriend was angry with him. Xiao Shui also didn't care about his weak body and immediately got out of bed and went to look for his girlfriend in the corner of the hospital. He personally saw his girlfriend go into a room, but when he went into the room he saw two women standing motionless, but she didn't move. When he entered the room, he saw two girlfriends standing motionless in front of his eyes. Little Handsome was tripped to the ground by an evil force. He was about to stand up when he suddenly heard a strange sound behind the curtain. Seemed to have something, but when Dejong knocked open the door, there was nothing in front of his eyes but Little Handsome lying motionless on the ground. But if not for their own eyes, I'm afraid that to the very end, they were still unwilling to believe what Little Handsome had said, and at the same time, it is also because of this that they were then clear. Little Handsome's situation had become so dangerous that they grabbed the comb and rushed through the rain to his father's house. There, they finally learned the full story. After hearing his father's words, Little Handsome thought to himself, "I've seen fathers who are pitiless, but never sons who are. You are a good father." But regret was pointless now. The damage was done, and the only thing left to do was to figure out how to get rid of the woman. It was then that May recalled the strange events of the day. Everything had started after they picked up that mysterious book. She realized that the book was the source of the disturbances. The only way to end the chaos was to destroy it. To banish the woman, May decided to perform the exorcism she had read about in the book. As night fell, she carefully set up the waxes, prepared the ritual, and hoped that it would send the woman back to where she came from. Immediately after that, she put the comb into the basin, and when she had done that, she took a mirror and chanted the mantra in front of it. Soon after that, the comb disappeared from the basin, and the door was locked with a clang, and a gust of wind blew in the darkened room. Xiaomei was so frightened that she couldn't even catch her breath, but just as soon as she turned back to the mirror, Xiaomei turned around and saw that the woman disappeared again. While she was terrified, the next moment she was suddenly in another world, where she saw the horrible past of this horrible woman. She had once been in a happy relationship, but when it came to marriage, she discovered that her beloved husband had gone out with another without her knowing it. The woman was devastated, but the other party continued to taunt her unabashedly, and after a series of vicious remarks, the woman's heart dropped. His spirit was utterly crushed, and his agonized screams shattered the mirrors right in front of his eyes. After that, he collected the shards of glass scattered on the ground and took the lives of the good couple. Then, without any hesitation, he dashed to the lake and leaped in. However, because there was no sign of movement inside the house, Handsome couldn't bear to wait any longer. He rushed over and repeatedly slammed his body against the door, but the inner door remained unchanged. Eventually, he managed to open the door, but as soon as he stepped inside, he discovered the room was engulfed in a thick fog, making it impossible to see anyone. Yet, determined to rescue his girlfriend, he forced himself to venture into the room. While Handsome was feeling his way around, a hand suddenly grabbed him. Before he could respond, he was startled to see another May standing beside him, then a third, a fourth, and a fifth, until countless other beauties surrounded him, all asking Handsome the same questions over and over again. As the other side pressed on, Handsome's mind was about to explode, but in the end, through his love for his girlfriend, he was able to distinguish who was the real May from the countless false identities, and it was a kiss that made her retreat. The monument at the bottom of the lake shattered and the door of the room slowly opened, and all was finally quiet. But when they were about to go back, they couldn't see Dejang's body, and so Handsome immediately went to the room to look for him. But to their surprise they found Dejang in the basement, hiding in the room. It seemed that they had made things too simple, and that everything had not yet ended, and that the woman was still pestering them, so they drove away at once. But as soon as they drove into a forest, the car stopped where it was, and it wouldn't start, and Handsome, believing that it was broken down, got out of the car to examine it, and left May and sisters in the car, and that was the very moment when May saw it again, and she saw the car. The woman, immediately after the car was flooded with a large amount of lake water, found the door locked.
Roma!
Xiaomei used her shoulders to hit the glass, but it was useless. Seeing that she was about to be drowned by the lake, Shuai, in a moment of desperation, directly picked up a stone and smashed it, which finally saved them both. After this incident, Shuai's sister suddenly realized that there was no way to hide, or perhaps the only thing she could do was to offer Xiaomei to the woman. So, she took advantage of Mei's inattention and tied her up. But just as she was about to proceed, she was stopped by her father, who believed that his resentment could not be fully resolved by sacrificing one or two people. As soon as Liao had finished speaking, the woman appeared behind her. The father, who was not afraid of the woman who had taken his wife away, approached her and played the card of affection on her. She had always believed that no man in the world was good. Then, she revealed her true form and immediately rushed to her rescue. However, she only managed to grab a strand of the woman's hair. When she realized she was on the verge of dying, Xiaomei quickly untied her hand, found a pair of scissors, and cut off the strand of hair. The house finally became quiet. But soon, the terrifying sound of pig-killing gunshots echoed throughout the room. Everyone in the room turned to look at her, and she saw the entire room and realized she was a piglet. Observing the scene before her, Mei understood that she might be able to kill her by cutting off her hair. Without uttering a word, she headed straight to the lake. There, she saw her boyfriend had already been tortured by the woman and was lying on the shore, convulsing, with his spikes waking him up. Mei couldn't take it any longer, so she grabbed a pair of scissors and jumped into the lake. With a faint scream, Xiao Shuai on the shore finally returned to normal. They hugged tightly, but Xiao Shuai sensed something was off. He realized Xiaomei never swam, so he used scissors to cut her hair. She collapsed in the lake, resolving the matter, and Xiao Shuai found the real Xiaomei there. They lived without rest or intimacy, but since the incident, Xiaomei often played with her hair, seeming like a different person. Well, that's all for today's story. I'm Yasser Arafat. Please subscribe for more interesting horror videos. See you next time.